There are moments in life that completely break us. We don't see them coming, and when they arrive, the world shifts beneath our feet. The day I lost my wife was the day my world changed forever. I remember that morning so clearly. It started like any other, but by nightfall, everything I knew about love, safety, and togetherness was gone. I found myself standing in the middle of our living room, surrounded by silence, so thick it felt like it could swallow me whole. The photos on the wall, the scent of her perfume still hanging in the air, her favorite book resting on the table. All these tiny reminders that she had truly been here, and now she wasn't. If you ever experienced loss, maybe you know exactly what I mean. The pain is so raw it's hard to breathe. Every second is filled with the echo of their absence. The world keeps moving, but it feels like time has stopped for you. Suddenly, everything is a reminder. Her laugh, her touch, the way she used to make coffee in the morning. Grief is a strange companion. It doesn't announce its arrival, and it never really leaves. It just changes shape, taking on new forms as we struggle to keep moving forward. But here's something I want you to know. Right from the start, you are not alone in this. Maybe you're sitting there right now, feeling that same emptiness, wondering how to get through another day. Maybe you're struggling to find meaning, or asking yourself if it's even possible to smile again. I know how it feels to be lost, to be scared of the future, and to be weighed down by memories that hurt as much as they heal. This is not a story of someone who had all the answers. It's a story of someone who found hope in the middle of heartbreak, who learned to stand up even when it seemed impossible. If this resonates with you, I invite you to stay with me until the end of this video. And if you know someone who's facing the same kind of loss, please share this story with them. Sometimes, all we need is a little light to remind us that even after the darkest night, the sun will rise again. My name is Lucas. I never imagined that I would need to introduce myself like this. In the shadow of such a huge loss. For years, I was simply a husband. My world was built around 2 cups of coffee in the morning, shared glances across the dinner table, and laughter echoing down the hallway. Suddenly, I found myself alone in a quiet house, surrounded by memories that once brought joy and now felt like silent witnesses to my pain. The day my wife passed away was the day I learned what emptiness truly meant. No words can ever prepare you for that first moment of true solitude. At first, I didn't really understand what was happening to me. The reality of death felt unreal, like a bad dream I kept hoping to wake up from. Every morning I would reach out for her beside me, expecting her warmth, but all I found was a cold pillow and the sound of my own heartbeat. The silence was louder than any noise. I would walk through the house, touching her things, feeling her presence in the air, and wishing, hoping, for just one more day. Grieving was like falling into a dark hole with no bottom. I learned quickly that grief is not just sadness. It's confusion, anger, guilt, and sometimes even relief. All these emotions crashed over me like waves, relentless and unpredictable. Some days I wanted to scream at the world. Other days I just wanted to hide. Even simple things like cooking breakfast or folding laundry became painful reminders of the life we had built together. It felt like I was drowning, searching for air, and all I could do was hold on. The fear of the unknown was overwhelming. Being alone after losing someone you love is an experience I wouldn't wish on anyone. The loneliness wasn't just physical. It was spiritual, emotional, even physical. I felt cut off from the rest of the world, like no one could possibly understand what I was going through. Friends and family tried to help, but their words felt empty. People would say, "She's in a better place," or "Time heals all wounds," but none of those phrases could touch the pain inside my chest. Healing after death is a journey with no roadmap. Every night, I lay in bed and tried to make sense of my new reality. The darkness in my room felt different now, heavier, more permanent. I missed the little things the most, her voice calling out from another room, the way she would reach for my hand, the sound of her laughter. Life after loss isn't just about missing someone. It's about missing yourself, too. I wasn't the same person anymore. It's as if part of my soul had gone with her, leaving a hollow space I didn't know how to fill. I tried to keep busy, hoping that activity would distract me from my pain. I cleaned the house, fixed old things that had been broken for years, and took long walks alone. But nothing could fill the emptiness. The walls echoed with memories, and the silence was deafening. I realized that loneliness after loss is different from any other kind of loneliness. It's a loneliness that settles deep in your bones, making even the brightest days seem gray and cold. Sometimes, I wonder if I would ever feel whole again. It was hard to find purpose in my days. I stopped doing things I once loved, because everything reminded me of her. Cooking our favorite meals brought tears. Watching our shows felt pointless, and music, something we always enjoyed together, became almost unbearable. Living alone after loss felt like learning to walk again with broken legs. Every small step was a victory, but it was always shadowed by pain. I realized I needed to give myself permission to grieve, even if I didn't know what that looked like. I started to notice how my mind played tricks on me. Sometimes, for just a moment, I would hear her voice or see her out the corner of my eye. These moments of hope were always followed by disappointment, reminding me of the finality of her absence. Grieving is filled with these moments, a dance between hope and reality, longing and acceptance. I learned to be gentle with myself, to accept that grief had its own timeline, and I couldn't rush through it, no matter how much I wanted to. The days and nights seemed to blend together. Sometimes I forgot what day it was. Grieving had become my new normal. I stopped making plans because the future felt too uncertain. People told me to move on, but I didn't want to forget her. I was terrified that if I started living again, I would lose the last pieces of her I still carried inside me. So I held on to the pain, not realizing that healing and holding on could exist together. The process was slow, and sometimes it felt like nothing was changing at all. Sleep became difficult. Some nights, I would lie awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying memories in my mind. Other nights, I would dream of her. Sometimes the dreams were beautiful. Sometimes they left me waking up in tears. Losing someone you love is like living two lives, the life you show the world and the life you keep hidden in your heart. I learned to wear a brave face, even when I felt broken inside. But I knew, deep down, that I couldn't pretend forever. I started writing letters to her, letters I never intended to send. It was my way of talking to her, of keeping her memory alive. I wrote about my day, my fears, my regrets, and my hopes. Each letter became a small release, a way to let some of the pain out of my heart. Over time, I realized that grief wasn't just about missing her, but about finding myself again in the spaces she left behind. These letters became a bridge between my past and my uncertain future. The hardest part was accepting that my life had changed forever. I didn't want to let go of the past, but I knew I couldn't stay frozen in time. I began to understand that grief was a journey, a long, winding road filled with unexpected turns. There were days I felt like giving up, but somehow I kept moving forward. Each small step was a victory, even if it didn't feel like it at the time. I learned that hope can survive even in the darkest places. There were times when I questioned everything, my beliefs, my faith, my purpose. Losing someone so close forces you confront the biggest questions of life and death. I found myself searching for meaning in the smallest things. A bird sitting outside my window, the warmth of the sun on my face, the kindness of a stranger. Slowly, I started to see that life, even in its pain, still offered moments of beauty. It was up to me to find them. I try to remember that my wife would want me to keep living. She always believed in finding light, even in the darkest times. I could almost hear her encouraging me, telling me to keep going. The memories that once hurt so much began to offer comfort. Instead of seeing them as reminders of loss, I started to see them as gifts, evidence of a love that was real and lasting. This realization didn't take away the pain, but it gave me something to hold on to. On some days, I still felt lost. The grief would return without warning, sometimes triggered by a smell, a song, or an old photograph. But with each wave, I grew a little stronger. I learned that pain and healing could exist together. I didn't have to choose one or the other. I could mourn my wife and still look for moments of joy. This balance didn't come easily, but it was possible. I learned to let others in, even when it was hard. At first, I pushed people away, thinking they couldn't understand what I was going through. But as time passed, I realized that connection was a lifeline. Talking about my wife, sharing stories, laughing and crying with friends and family. All of these things helped me heal. I discovered that love doesn't disappear when someone dies. It changes shape, but it's still there. There were times when I felt like I was moving backwards, falling into old patterns of sadness and isolation. But I refused to let grief define me. I knew I had to keep searching for meaning, even when it felt impossible. The journey wasn't just about surviving loss. It was about rediscovering life in all its messy, beautiful complexity. I wanted to honor my wife's memory by living fully, even if I didn't always know how. Slowly, I started to rebuild my life. I took up old hobbies, reached out to friends I hadn't seen in years, and allowed myself to dream again. Every day wasn't easy, but each small victory gave me hope. I learned that healing wasn't about forgetting the past. It was about creating a new future, one day at a time. I realized that I was stronger than I ever thought possible. As I look back on those first months alone, I see now how much I have changed. I am not the same person I was before my wife died. Grief has shaped me, taught me, and forced me to grow. It has shown me that life after loss is possible, even when it feels impossible. I carry her memory with me every day, but I also carry hope for what's still to come. Waking up every morning to an empty bed became both a challenge and a quiet invitation. I had to decide every single day if I would let the emptiness swallow me or if I would try to take one small step forward. Some mornings, it felt impossible to move at all. The sun would stream through the window, lighting up dust motes in the air, and I just stared at the ceiling, wishing for the comfort of her presence. In those moments, the house felt enormous, every room echoing with memories and absence. I quickly realized that surviving loss isn't a single decision. It's a series of tiny, sometimes painful, choices. I started with the simplest tasks, making the bed, opening the curtains, washing the dishes. Each act was a quiet rebellion against despair. I told myself that if I could keep moving, even in the smallest ways, maybe my heart would eventually follow. Living alone after loss meant learning to be gentle with myself, giving space to my sadness, but also inviting little sparks of hope. There were days I felt completely abandoned, not just by my wife, but by the universe itself. I questioned everything. Why her? Why now? Why me? I realized that grief can make you feel like you've been dropped in the middle of a storm with no map and no shelter. The friends who once called every day slowly faded into their own routines. Family tried to help, but their lives kept moving while mine seemed frozen. The loneliness became sharper, cutting deeper than I thought possible. Yet, even in the darkest moments, there were tiny reminders that life was still happening around me. Birds sang outside my window. Children laughed on the street. The world didn't stop just because my heart was broken. I found myself caught between two realities, one filled with pain, and another that whispered ever so softly that there was still beauty in the world. Healing after grief started to mean noticing those small, everyday miracles. Taking the first steps toward rebuilding my life felt like learning to walk again. I tried new routines, hoping to fill the empty spaces left behind. Sometimes it meant cooking a new recipe or taking a different route on my daily walk. Other times, it meant sitting quietly, letting myself feel whatever emotions bubbled up. I learned that moving forward after loss isn't a straight path. It's a winding road with moments of doubt, hope, and everything in between. One of the hardest things was learning how to be my own companion. For years, I relied on my wife for comfort, laughter, and strength. Now, I had to find those things within myself. I started journaling, pouring my thoughts onto the page as honestly as I could. Sometimes the words came easily. Other times, I could only write, I miss you. These small acts of self-care slowly helped me reconnect with the world outside my grief. I remember the first time I allowed myself to laugh again. It happened unexpectedly, during a phone call with an old friend. For a moment, I forgot the weight I was carrying. The sound felt strange, almost foreign, like a piece of my old self peeking through the cracks. It didn't erase my sadness, but it reminded me that joy could coexist with pain. Grief doesn't mean you stop living. It means you learn to carry both sorrow and hope in the same heart. My wife used to tell me that life is made of small moments. I didn't understand that fully until I lost her. Now, each ordinary day was precious. Making coffee, watering the plants, hearing the rain against the window, these became little rituals of healing. Sometimes I'd speak to her out loud, sharing stories or simply saying good morning. It helped me feel less alone, as if she was still a part of my daily life. As I tried to move forward, I faced setbacks. There were days when the grief returned with full force, leaving me breathless and raw. On those days, I let myself rest. I learned not to judge my progress by anyone else's timeline. Healing is personal and unpredictable. What mattered most was showing up for myself, even when all I could do was survive another day. Coping with loneliness meant learning to listen to my needs, rather than pushing myself too hard. I started reaching out to others, even when it felt uncomfortable. Sometimes, I'd join a friend for coffee or accept an invitation to a family dinner. At first, I felt out of place, like a puzzle piece that no longer fit. But with time, these connections helped me remember that I was still part of something bigger. The world was still open to me, even if it looked different now. Community became a gentle reminder that love survives, even after loss. During quiet evenings, I explored new hobbies. I learned to play an instrument, tried painting, and even took up gardening. Each new activity was a step toward rediscovering my own identity. My wife had always encouraged me to try new things, and I could almost hear her cheering me on. These hobbies didn't replace her, but they gave my days new color and meaning. I found moments of peace and creativity, and that peace slowly grew. Sometimes, the house felt less empty. It's not that the pain disappeared, but the spaces that once echoed with loss began to fill with new memories. I started to feel gratitude for the years we shared, for the lessons I was learning, and for the simple fact that I was still here, still breathing, still able to love. This gratitude didn't erase the sadness, but it gave me the strength to keep moving. There were moments when I wanted to give up. The sadness felt endless, like a weight I'd carry forever. But every time I made it through another difficult day, I realized I was stronger than I thought. I began to trust in my own resilience. Life after loss is never easy, but it's possible to build something new from the ruins of heartbreak. I wasn't just surviving. I was slowly, painfully learning how to live again. My relationship with my wife changed, too. She was no longer here in a physical sense, but I felt her presence in the choices I made, in the kindness I showed others, and in the courage I found to keep going. Love after death is a strange thing. It's quieter, but no less real. I carried her with me, not as a burden, but as a guiding light. Her memory became a source of strength, rather than just a source of pain. Learning to forgive myself was a huge part of my healing. I carried regrets, words left unsaid, things I wished I'd done differently. I realized that holding on to guilt only deepened my pain. Forgiveness, both for myself and for life's unpredictability, allowed me to move forward. I let myself feel sadness, but I also allowed space for compassion. Coping with loss meant learning to be gentle with every part of myself, even the broken pieces. The hardest days seemed endless, but one morning, I woke up and noticed something had shifted inside me. It wasn't a sudden burst of happiness, but a small sense of peace I hadn't felt in months. I realized that the storm of grief, though still raging, had softened just enough for me to breathe. For the first time, I didn't wake up crushed by the weight of loss. I felt curiosity about what the day might bring. This small change was the beginning of my turning point, a quiet sign that healing was possible even after unimaginable pain. I decided to challenge myself with something new. My wife had always dreamed of learning how to paint, so I bought a set of brushes and paints in her honor. The first time I sat at the easel, I was terrified of failing, but as I moved the brush, I felt connected to her memory in a fresh, creative way. Each color on the canvas was a step forward, a reminder that I was still capable of discovering new joys. Personal growth after death isn't easy, but it often starts with these vulnerable, uncertain moments. Some days I stumbled. There were times when anger and sadness flooded back stronger than ever. It's easy to feel like you're moving backwards, even after making progress. The emotional pain after losing someone is unpredictable. It comes in waves, sometimes gentle, sometimes crushing. I learned not to fight those feelings, but to let them wash over me, knowing they would eventually pass. Overcoming grief meant allowing myself to feel every emotion, even the ugly, uncomfortable ones. As I explored new hobbies and routines, I also discovered how much I had changed. I noticed my reactions to small things were different. I had more patience, more compassion, and a new perspective on life's fragility. Dealing with emotional pain opened my eyes to the struggles of others. I started volunteering at a local shelter, simply offering a listening ear or a comforting word. Giving back helped me see that, even in my own brokenness, I could still bring light to someone else's darkness. There were times I wanted to give up. The process of healing was slow, and sometimes it felt pointless. I missed my wife every single day, but I kept returning to those little moments of progress. A finished painting, a good conversation, a sunset that took my breath away. Finding strength after loss means celebrating even the tiniest victories. Each one is proof that you're moving forward, even when you can't see the end of the road. One evening, I found an old letter from my wife tucked away in a book. Her handwriting was steady and familiar. She wrote about her dreams for our future, her hopes for my happiness, and her belief in my strength. Reading her words, I felt both grief and gratitude. Her message reached across time and loss, reminding me that love doesn't end with death. That letter became a new source of courage, a sign that I could keep going, even when the road was rough. I began opening up to people around me. For months, I had hidden my pain, trying to shield others from my vulnerability. Now, I started to share my story, not just the sadness, but also the small triumphs. I realized that talking about grief wasn't a burden to others. In fact, it helped many people feel less alone in their own struggles. Healing journey after loss is not just personal. It's also communal. We all need someone to remind us that we're not walking this road by ourselves. Sometimes when I felt overwhelmed, I'd go for a walk and let my mind wander. I thought about the life I had before and the person I was becoming now. I realized that losing my wife had changed me forever, but it didn't mean my life was over. I was being shaped by loss, but I was also growing in ways I never expected. The discovery of new parts of myself was both frightening and beautiful. Facing challenges alone forced me to dig deep. I had to find strength in places I didn't know existed. It wasn't just about surviving day to day. It was about learning how to thrive in a world that looked completely different. Some days, my courage felt paper thin. But every time I faced a fear, whether it was meeting new people or trying something unfamiliar, I grew a little bit braver. Overcoming grief is a process of building inner strength, one day at a time. I realized that it was okay to ask for help. I reached out to support groups and met others who were also rebuilding after loss. Listening to their stories, I found comfort and inspiration. Their courage gave me hope that my own journey could lead somewhere meaningful. If you've gone through something similar, I invite you to share your experience in the comments. Your story might be the lifeline someone else needs right now. There were moments when the pain seemed to fade, replaced by a gentle nostalgia. I started to remember my wife not just with tears, but with smiles too. The good memories slowly became less painful. Instead, they became reminders of the love we shared and the life we built together. This shift was a quiet victory, a sign that healing was taking root. I wasn't forgetting her. I was learning to honor her memory by living fully. In the quiet hours, I sometimes spoke to her as if she were still listening. I shared my progress, my fears, and even my silly mistakes. This ritual helped me stay connected to her spirit, while also accepting that my life was moving forward. Finding meaning after loss is an ongoing process. It's about blending the old with the new, keeping memories alive while making space for the future. New friendships blossomed as I opened myself to the world again. I met people with their own stories of loss and healing. Our shared vulnerability created a bond that felt deep and real. I realized that every person carries a private world of grief and hope, and that our willingness to connect is what helps us heal. The journey is different for everyone, but we are united by the courage it takes to keep going. As I rebuilt my routines, I tried to nurture the little things that brought me peace. I found comfort in nature, in the steady rhythm of the seasons, the sound of rain, the growth of new leaves. Nature became a teacher, showing me that life goes on and that new beginnings are always possible. It reminded me that my pain, while unique, was part of a larger story. Sometimes I struggle with guilt for feeling happy. I questioned whether it was right to enjoy life without her by my side. But I realized that honoring her memory meant living the life she would want for me, a life of love, laughter, and growth. Accepting joy did not diminish my love for her. It proved that our bond was strong enough to withstand even the hardest trials. There were setbacks, of course. Anniversaries and special dates brought a fresh wave of pain. But with each challenge, I learned something new about resilience. I allowed myself to grieve, but I also celebrated how far I had come. Every challenge was a teacher, showing me that pain and healing could live side by side. By letting go of expectations and embracing the unknown, I began to trust the process of healing. I allowed myself to change, to grow, and to find hope again. The journey wasn't about replacing what was lost, but about discovering what was still possible. My life was not defined by what I had lost, but by how I chose to move forward, one day at a time. Looking back, I see the long path I have walked since that darkest day. At first, I didn't believe it was possible to heal. The pain felt too deep, the emptiness too endless. But step by step, something changed inside me. I began to accept that grief is not something you conquer, but something you learn to live with. In that acceptance, I found a kind of freedom. The freedom to honor my loss and also let hope grow again. Small victories began to shape my new life. I smiled more often, not because the pain was gone, but because I was learning to carry it differently. The memories of my wife, once sharp and painful, started to bring me comfort. I realized that love isn't lost when someone dies. It changes, becoming a quiet strength within us. Healing after grief meant allowing that love to transform me from the inside out. I started to rebuild my world, piece by piece. The house that once echoed with emptiness became a place of new beginnings. I painted the walls, rearranged the furniture, and added small touches that reflected my journey. Each change was both a goodbye and a welcome, a way of making space for the life that was waiting for me. Rediscovering hope felt like opening a window in a long-closed room. As I embraced new routines, I noticed a shift in my perspective. I stopped measuring my days by what I had lost and began noticing what I was gaining. Friendships deepened. My heart opened to moments of laughter and wonder. The world seemed less threatening, more filled with possibility. Accepting loss didn't mean forgetting my wife. It meant allowing myself to live a new chapter while carrying her memory with me. Some days, the sorrow would still return. I learned to greet it gently, like an old friend. Instead of resisting, I would sit with my grief and listen to what it had to teach me. Sometimes it brought tears, other times it brought gratitude. Over time, I realized that healing is not about getting rid of pain, but learning to coexist with it, making peace with the shadows so the light can return. I began to see meaning in the little things. A warm cup of tea on a cold morning, a conversation with a neighbor, the feeling of sunlight on my skin. Each moment became an opportunity for gratitude. I understood that joy and sadness could exist together, neither canceling out the other. Finding meaning after death was not about searching for answers, but about choosing to participate in life again. I found myself drawn to helping others. The empathy I gained from my loss became a bridge to connect with people going through their own struggles. I volunteered at support groups, listened without judgment, and shared my story when it felt right. These acts of service became another form of healing, a way of giving purpose to my pain and turning it into something good. One day, I realized I was no longer just surviving. I was living. The difference was subtle but profound. I could look in a mirror and see someone who had been shaped by love, loss, and the courage to keep moving forward. My wife's memory wasn't a burden anymore. It was a blessing, a source of inspiration that encouraged me to keep seeking beauty in the world. I created new traditions in her honor. On her birthday, I'd cook her favorite meal and invite friends over to share stories. I planted a small garden, each flower a reminder of the life and love we shared. These rituals became sacred, anchoring me in the present while still honoring the past. I learned that life after loss is built on both remembrance and renewal. Forgiving myself was perhaps the hardest lesson. I let go of regrets and accepted that I had done my best with the time we had. Guilt slowly faded, replaced by self-compassion. I understood that being human means making mistakes, loving deeply, and sometimes losing more than we can bear. In forgiving myself, I finally allowed healing to settle in my heart. With time, the fear of the future softened. I began to look ahead not with dread, but with curiosity. I wondered what adventures still awaited me, what new joys I might discover. Personal transformation after loss doesn't happen overnight. It's a slow, gentle unfolding, a process of finding yourself again, stronger and wiser than before. There were moments when I still longed for the past, but I learned to balance nostalgia with hope. The story of my life didn't end with loss. Instead, it became richer, deeper, filled with hard-won wisdom. I realized that true redemption comes not from erasing pain, but from allowing it to shape a more compassionate, courageous self. I embraced imperfection. My journey wasn't flawless. There were setbacks and disappointments. But each challenge taught me something valuable: resilience, patience, the power of vulnerability. I let go of the idea that I had to move on or be over it. Instead, I chose to move forward, carrying everything I'd learned along the way. The world, once filled with reminders of what I'd lost, became a place of endless possibility. I was no longer afraid to love again, not just others, but myself. I gave myself permission to dream, to laugh, to make mistakes. The future was no longer a blank space, but a canvas waiting for my story. Now, when I think of my wife, I feel peace. I know that her love is still with me, woven into the fabric of who I am. I see her smile and the kindness of strangers, hear her voice in my moments of courage. The journey of healing is never truly finished, but I walk it now with gratitude, hope, and an open heart. If you've read or listened to my story and felt something resonate within you, I want you to know you are not alone. Loss may change us, but it can also reveal our hidden strength. I invite you to share your own journey in the comments below. How have you found hope after loss? What helped you to keep going? Let's create a space where stories can lift each other up. If this story has touched you, please like, share, and subscribe so more people can find comfort and courage on their own path of healing. Your voice matters here. Every comment is a step toward community. Every share a light for someone still in the dark. Thank you for being with me through this journey. Together, we can honor the past, embrace the present, and welcome the future with love, resilience, and hope.